Welcome back to The Line. Our final topic this week is the Albuquerque Police Department. The Albuquerque Journal reported this week that some police reform groups allege that APD Chief Gordon Eden is not very involved in the process of meeting with community members and discussing changes in policies and practices required by that agreement between the U.S. Department of Justice and the city, of course. Tripp, we've talked about the APD reforms many times here on The Line, and beyond the concerns reported in the Journal, do you think the city is doing enough to get this thing moving, or are we getting this information sort of after the fact?
I mean, this is another type of concern from community groups. There have been also community, the board that was appointed that actually has had real kind of like concerns about how committed the police department is to this reform, the DOJ consent decree and whatnot. It does not surprise me that they would actually be a little concerned that the chief is not showing up. What does that mean? I have no idea. I think we have some broader questions right now with a new president-elect and a new DOJ.
Right.
So that'll be kind of interesting.
I hadn't thought about that either. It's interesting.
Yeah. But so I mean, there have been concerns from community groups about how policies were written. So this is just another form of kind of concern here.
Right. Laura, body English is a big part of leadership, and my sense of it is that the chief is sending surrogates to go to these meetings, and I guess he's feeling like he's covered. He's getting the information, but the body English of him being there physically is the point. It seems to me these folks are making. That ability to take that step and say, I'm listening here. Would you agree with that?
I think that's huge, and I think it should be a priority for him. I'm not sure that we can necessarily read into his not showing up as a clear indication of something, but in terms of an actual clear path that he's just not willing to participate. But the lack of showing up shows that they're at least tone deaf to what's necessary right now, and I think, just given everything that's been going on, the Berry administration needs to make this more of a priority, and from the top down, they need to be able to show that they're actually committed and that they're showing up, and that means the top guy has to show up to these things. So, we have such a small community. This is such a huge issue for us that it just doesn't make sense for him to be prioritizing other things over this.
Right. Inez, it's difficult when you're in a situation to realize how you're being perceived by the greater public. But again, perception is reality, right? I mean, it's a simple step, but it's huge when you think about it. Yeah.
I think from the outside, reading these stories in the newspaper and not living in Albuquerque, my sense is that the top brass at APD, the top officials of the city, don't really accept that they have a problem.
Gotcha.
And until you accept you have a problem, you can't change it.
Right.
And I remember back in 1991 when I was moving home to New Mexico from Florida, I called my mother and said, I got the job at the Tribune, I'm coming back. And she says, that's nice, honey, I'm glad you'll be in Albuquerque. They had a ranch in Mora at the time. She said, but be careful because the police there shoot people.
Ooh, no kidding.
And this is my old mother telling me that. And here we are all these years later, and the police here still shoot people.
Isn't that something? Tom, there's a quote I found interesting in a Journal piece. The city attorney, Jessica Hernandez, her prominence in these meetings signals to the community that the city views reforms primarily as a legal dispute rather than a transformative process. Do you see what I mean? Again, body English is important here, right?
Yeah, it is. And I don't know the different committees or who makes up the different committees. There could be some political aspects and stuff, but attending meetings is one aspect. Being engaged in the community is another. And I had actually happened to come across Chief Eden earlier this week and just started up a conversation and saying, hey, so what's going on with APD? And he was talking about a lot of the reforms that we've talked about here at the table, but he also shared some items that are coming down the pike.
Okay.
And my perception is that he really is coming up with different ideas of how do we fix this issue that he clearly inherited. Right. And a lot of it has to do with really finding a new business model, or a business model that will work within the confines of the union leadership. Because and he didn't say that, I just picked this up, that that is something that is a clear challenge to anybody in city or state government that wants to be able to make any significant changes. You have to work within these confines. But I think that he's engaged and he's involved. He's just not, it's an easy target right now because of a lot of national narratives that are taking place.
Interesting little twist here. Tripp Jennings on the week. We're at about a minute and a half here. The special prosecutor has come forward and said we have some new evidence, specifically some camera footage in the cases that were just done for Sandy Perez, Keith Sandy and Dominic Perez, rather. What do you make of that? The timing was interesting, but it was more the how it was put out there that was more interesting to me. What did you make of that?
I think that all of us should be paying attention. I wonder if there's something coming down the pike, that might raise more questions about APD and practices and stuff like that.
Footage is powerful. I mean, we never know about anything. But again, from your gut sense, Laura Sanchez-Reve, would a special prosecutor even bother to say something like this unless it's like Tripp saying, something worthy of a new look?
Well, to me, it was interesting, and it was partly strategy to announce that there was new evidence at the same time as you're talking about a possible plea deal. So there's a question in my mind about whether that was being used as leverage to try to push the defendants into some kind of a plea deal. It didn't work. I mean, they have one of them is represented by Sam Bregman. He was very clear that, no plea deals on the table because his client didn't commit any crime, is what he said. So there's a lot of posturing right now. But the real question is, once Raul Torres takes that position January 1st, does somebody in his office, does he immediately make that a priority? I assume he does. The question is whether it's someone in the office who's been, a prosecutor for some time under Kerry Brandenburg, or he brings in somebody else from the outside. And I think he's got some options to be able to do that.
Good point, Theo. Let that be the last word. Thank you all. Interesting week here in the great state of New Mexico.
So quick question. Body English is
I'm Gene Grant. New Mexico PBS staff and viewers were saddened by the news that Gwen Ifill, host of the PBS NewsHour, had died. She was not only an excellent journalist, but the person who offered support and encouragement to young journalists, particularly African Americans. Gwen Ifill joined us in 2010, right after the midterm elections, to talk about her book, The Breakthrough: Politics and Race in the Age of Obama.
I was raised at a time when people were still marching in the streets and sitting at lunch counters. I'm watching a generation of young black kids who are raised who don't know what lunch counters even are. This is alien to them almost. And even when President Obama was elected, they went, so what? What is happening is something different from what we saw in the civil rights movement. Instead of marches, instead of laws on the books, we now see a generation of candidates who are taking advantage of the laws that were already passed. They're no longer trying to get laws passed. They're taking advantage of public accommodations. They're taking advantage of access to elite educations, which we see so many of them in this breakthrough crowd have. And as a result, the impetus kind of changes. It's not identity focused. It's not identity driven. But what you see when you see them all of a sudden in the mix, not only in Congress and in the White House, but also in state legislatures and in mayors' offices, is that we have now, the word is integrated politics in a way that hadn't happened in the 1960s or 70s.
We'll miss you, Gwen. And as always, the crew here at New Mexico in Focus appreciate your time and effort to stay informed and engaged. And we'll see you next week in Focus.
Funding for New Mexico in Focus provided by the McCune Charitable Foundation and the Nalita E. Walker Fund for KNME-TV, the KNME-TV Endowment Fund, and viewers like you.